Okay, so battery died and then I had to go nurse and put baby to sleep. So take two. I was talking about food. I was talking about where he was, where I started to realize that I needed to really hone in on his diet and see what was going on there, since he refused a lot of foods and couldn't eat a lot of foods. And um, even though I thought I was limiting sugar and things like that, like we didn't even give him juice, and rarely, if we did, we do half and half water, things like that. So I thought, oh, and I used to, all the smoothies, like kale berry smoothies, beet, kale, spinach. I was really big into the whole all of that, thinking that these plants were going to heal him at one point. So I was focusing on that as the most important thing, when in actuality I should have been focusing on the most nutrient dense sources of food. And also because he could at least drink a smoothie. That was one thing that he could tolerate. So I like that. And now when I do smoothies, I'll put raw egg yolks and raw milk, things like that into it. But so when you're working with the diet, you have to do a complete overhaul. You have to take out anything out of that house, out of their sight, anything you don't want them ingesting, you don't want them taking in. So juices, any processed carbs, things like that, breads. You almost want to go completely in keto with some of these kids. And of course, consult your doctor if you need to. I'm giving my story, okay? So I'm not trying to get people on a certain diet or anything like that. I think you just need to focus on the most nutrient dense sources, okay? So that's the most important thing. And remove all the grains, all the processed foods, basically. All the overabundance of sugar and this sort of thing. So once we did that, I realized just how little he was eating. So he liked eggs. That was, there was one point where I looked at my husband and I was like, well, he may just have to eat nothing but eggs for a few days and he'll survive. But, hopefully he'll start eating more, a wider variety of foods. And so I went and I started getting a raw milk. And if this is a really, really great thing to have, because if breast milk obviously would be the best option. You get a whole full spectrum of nutrients. You get all the micronutrients. You get everything you need. You could literally survive on this alone, So milk is very, very important for a kid like this. If they will drink milk, and most kids will, it's perfect, because that kind of fills the gaps and while you're trying to sort this sort of thing out, So yeah, find a local farmer. There's websites like the Weston A. Price that can help with this sort of thing, locating this. But you can just go to your local farmer market and ask farmers there, and ask around, and they usually can tell you and point you in the right direction. Most farmer markets will have it on hand, goat or cow milk. So local eggs, that's another great thing. Anyway, you can get them to eat it. Eggs are really great. So focus on what they will eat at first and just remove everything else. They may be fussy for a few days and upset that they don't have any other options, but eventually they'll get hungry enough if they're holding out or whatever, that they'll start eating. So that's what happened with him. He did start eating. I finally could get him to eat a hamburger, which was, we were doing, just the patties with a little ketchup at first. But now I will let him eat a hamburger, and he loves hamburgers, which I never could get him to eat. Chicken nuggets, mac and cheese, hamburgers, all the typical foods that kids like. I couldn't get him to eat those before. So this is a really big deal when you really turn all this on its head and straighten it out. And it's some things with their gut. They're sorting things out in their gut, and they're going to crave whatever the bacteria in their gut are craving. So if they're missing, like a lot of these kids with neurological issues are missing hundreds of species of bacteria. So if they're missing a bunch of bacteria, things like that, working with the food, working with the diet can help, because that starts building some of that, and getting a wider variety going on, and then they'll start craving the appropriate things and what their body really needs, instead of just sugar and carbs, which is basically what all of these kids, that's all they want to eat. Crackers, you know, and juice, and then everywhere you go, that's what everyone offers too. I mean, that's just, it's such a, oh, it's a thing. I notice it so bad. I mean, we've had to leave parks with him kicking and screaming because somebody came and offered a cupcake and I couldn't let him have it. And so it's kind of, it's a tough thing to go through, and but it's like, you know, this is their life. It's not like you're just being cruel. This is their life that you need to, this is very serious stuff. This is the time, these first few years, are when they're a child, these are the most critical times you can turn all this around, you know. So this is very important that you do all this very early, as soon as you can, as soon as you figure all this out. It's so important, because this is the time when things are still developing and your body can still straighten a lot of this out. Now, a lot of people who have grown up and still have ASD, they may be able to improve some symptoms, but they probably are stuck with the more serious, you know, neurological damage. That's just, that, sadly, that's the way it's been seen to turn out, you know. A lot of kids, when they're young, 2, 3 years old, 4, 5 even, they can heal quite often. And once you get past like that certain point, yeah, it might be too late. But these are some things you can do, and diet is the very first thing you should be pinpointing and honing in on and trying to sort out immediately. So he, like I said, he started eating, you know, the foods we wanted him to eat. He still will have issues here and there, you know, refusing certain things, but overall, like every morning we wake up and I make him over easy eggs, a few, he eats them, drinks a glass of raw milk, and I just focus on those things, and I'm not gonna deprive him completely now. I let him have bread, things like that sometimes, but it's just not a huge part of his diet anymore. So I wanted to kind of go over when his symptoms started healing. Now, as soon as we started doing this, and as soon as I started giving him the raw milk, I noticed within a few weeks he decided he would start using the potty instead of his diaper to go number 2, and so that was like a big ordeal. He started using more words. He started trying to communicate more. He used to be like sort of in his own world, and more. This was more when he was in this first year of all this happening, all in his own little world. You know, you'd call his name. We thought at one point he had hearing issues. You would call his name, he wouldn't respond, and he came out of all that, like, during those first couple years. He sort of worked himself out of all that. You know, he used to walk around sort of like in a, just confused. He'd forgotten a lot of stuff. He'd forgotten how to go and just play with his toys, things that are just so pretty typical, and that you wouldn't think about. But when he started playing with toys and just normal things, normal day-to-day things, it was a blessing. It really was. So he came out of a lot of that. In the end, like I said, when he turned 3, we started working with the diet, and that's when the huge leaps and bounds came. the nightmares stopped at that point. Like I said, diaper, he's now, I don't put a diaper on him at night even. He goes all the way through the night, wakes up in the morning and goes to the bathroom. So his speech is starting to improve. He still has, his enunciation is what he's having issues with now. He can't get, it's almost like a lisp, but not. It's like he just can't formulate certain words. And it may be apraxia. That's one thing we're looking at as far as speech disorders go. But like I said, words that used to be very easy for him, he can't, like hot, he can't, he'll say ought. He can't make the sound of the H and not even really the T very well. But he can communicate. He can understand language. It just comes out the wrong way sometimes. Like he'll say up when he means down. And it's just a little scrambled still, but we're getting there. We quit having to use the leash when we went places. Because he would, like I said, he would dart off everywhere we went, and it was pretty dangerous because if we were somewhere close to a highway or a street, he would just try to run as soon as he got loose, and I'd have to either hold him or, put a leash and do it like that. But he started being able to go places and just sit down for a moment or two at least, or just not run off. He's still a 3-year-old that wants to run around and play and do all that. So he's very, maybe you could even view it as ADD or something like that. I haven't been recommended that he has something like that, but he's a very, very energetic kid. He is very, very challenging. He's very energetic, and but he's typical now. Like I said, his doctor saw him a few months ago, and she wrote out that he's completely neurotypical, and she's not seeing any issues. So I think the speech is just going to keep going up. It's going to keep improving as he can get a better grip on the way he enunciates. And yeah, and it's amazing. It really is. It's amazing after all we've been through. So 2.5 years of this now. And I'm not someone who has a ton of money who can do some of the treatments that I see other people doing and paying to see all of these doctors all across the country, sometimes going out of country, and just doing all of this stuff they do. And really, when it comes down to it, one of the best things you can is just, like I said, hone in on the diet and really just try to get the body to heal itself. Now, there are genetic mutations that play a part in this. Like I said, it's multifaceted. There are so many different issues. I'm not even going to get into what I fully think the causes are and all that. I'll just name a few things that I think are contributing. I think there are genetic mutations, and because a lot of these autistic kids, well, I think it's almost 100%, it's in the 90s, test that they have MTHFR mutations. So they have that, and then they get hit with all the vaccines. Like, it's about 24 doses they get by 1-year-old by the time they turn 1-year-old. So yeah, it's a lot. We receive way more vaccines than I received as a kid. I received a few as a kid, and then our parents and our grandparents received even less. So it just keeps going up. And there's, of course, aluminum, and there's chemicals in these vaccines, and there's viruses, of course, and you can't really know how all that stuff is doing in the body. I mean, we can do studies on it and look and see what reactions kids are having, and that is a whole other topic completely. I'm not going to get into all that here because the studies are done faulty, and there's just so many reasons why they're missing these things, basically. So in all my years as a child going through the Army, I didn't receive as many vaccines as my 1-year-old did in that first year of life. So you just have to take that into account. They are receiving more vaccines than most of us have received in our entire life in that first year of life. You know, as their brain is developing, as they're an infant, you know, they're learning to crawl and walk, and their immune system isn't even fully developed. I mean, all of this stuff is developing, and you're just hitting it again and again. It's like so many assaults. So if they have a genetic mutation, then they're getting hit with the vaccines. Then if they're not breastfeeding, and if their diet is poor, you know, you've got issues there. And so they're just, and then there are chemicals everywhere else, you know. There are so many different factors that go into this. Some things can happen during pregnancy. It's just, it's so, this isn't inherited, basically. This isn't like something you're picking up genetically. Like I said, you can have a genetic mutation that your mom or dad had, and that could make you more susceptible to these things, but this is not something you inherited. Otherwise, our grandparents, we would see like 1 in 50 with autism like we see today, which actually I think is like 1 in 30 now. So yeah, it doesn't make sense. We don't have epidemics that are genetic, so that doesn't make sense. That's not realistic. That's just complete nonsense, honestly. So yeah, it's something that it's environmental. It's happening, and as a matter of fact, I live right by Amish communities, so I plan on going and interviewing them as well eventually, and talking about how they don't have all of these issues, you know. And so yeah, to sum it all up, you can heal this. You can most of the time you can heal it and recover these children if you are focusing on diet and not getting any more chemicals in their body, not putting any more chemicals into their body, any more viruses, things like that. If they get a virus, it needs to come through the eyes, nose, and mouth, you know, while their brain and their body's developing. So that's all I really have to say about that, I think. And yeah, I will do future videos talking more about that, you know, all the factors that play into this. So look forward to that, and good seeing y'all. All right.